So this week we learn Parshas Emor, and these shiurim usually deal with Parshas Shavua or with Inyan HaOmer. Today we have the combination of both. We are in the midst of Yemei Sefirat. In another 2 or 3 days it is already Lag BaOmer, and in this week's Parsha, that is the source of the mitzvah. Usefartem lechem memochras haShabbos. Today, we're dealing with a fascinating sugya, and we're going to visit 10 sites. And in a shir of this nature, I always apologize, and I say, Moshel lemaha dovedaima. Like a tour guide, we're going to have an amazing trip. We're going to visit 10 sites. But I tell you in advance, we can't spend too much time in any of these sites because there is so much to see and so much to enjoy. So the point of departure is HaOmer. Our destination, the final destination is HaOmer. But Bein Bein, we're going to visit 8 different sugyas. And the topic we will be discussing is when we are mekayem a mitzvah mitzad sveike derabanan lekula, do we say a brocha or don't we say a brocha? Do we say, if you could be mekayem the mitzvah and you're yoytze, then you could say the brocha as well, or maybe no. Sofek brochas lekula. Regarding the mitzvah, yes, the ruling is you could be mekayem the mitzvah sveike derabanan lekula, but you don't say a brocha. This is the question. And we will see contradictions. And to work out those contradictions, like always, in the process of halacha, of lamdis, or mechadish, hagdoras, kedei liyashev stiris, and that is how halacha develops. Tov Peitasiv Beis, hamedaktikin einam soifrim atzei sekechovim v'chein ra'ui linhoig. The background to this Sif in Shulchan Aruch is a machloikis. Shalosh machloikis bedavar. The Rosh and Tosfos Menachos Samach Vav and Aleph and the Rosh Sof Masechet Psocha maintain. Even lachatchila one could count Sfias HaOmer Bein Hashmashot, because Sfias HaOmer bisman hazeh derabanan kemavor b'Menachos Samach Vav sveike derabanan lekula. So if you could count the misvira, you could say the brocha as well. The Ran of Psochim totally disagrees, and the Ran says, Sveike derabanan lekula is a concept b'di eved, but you cannot lechatchila be mekayem a mitzvah al tzad hasofik. You need to try and do your utmost to steer clear and to be mekayem the mitzvahs beyond doubt al tzad avadai. The Rashba, Shuvas Rashba quoted in the Beis Yosef is somewhat of a compromise, and the Rashba says, Hamedaktikim, wait for Tzei Sakechovim. And that is the right thing to do. But it is clear from the Shulchan Aruch, if you count Bein Hashmashot, you could say a brocha. Because if you don't say a brocha, the Beis Yosef should have stipulated and clearly explained, if you count Lefnei Tzei Sakechovim, you don't say a brocha. So it is clear in Shulchan Aruch. Sveike derabanan lekula, you could be yoytze Bein Hashmashot, you say a brocha as well. 4 different sources within which the Mishnah Berurah paskins on the contrary. And we must reconcile. We must explain that the Mishnah Berurah didn't oversee a Sif in Shulchan Aruch. Tov Kuf Peiches, Sif Koten Aleph, and Hilchos Shofar. If for any reason you didn't blow shofar and it's already Bein Hashmashot, and the day is almost over, you blow the shofar without a bracha. And the Mishnah Berurah is not mechalek. He doesn't differentiate between the first day of Rosh Hashanah and the second day. First day of Rosh Hashanah is the Oraisa, second day is only midrabanan. And in both days, you blow Bein Hashmashot, but because it's a sofek, you don't say a bracha, contrary to what we just learned in Sfias HaOmer. Tofresh Peizayin Sif Koten Hey, the same regarding Mikra Megillah. For any reason, there was no Megillah, and we achieved the Megillah, it's already Bein Hashmashot, Purim, close to Tzei Sakechovim. You do the Megillah without a bracha. Tofresh nun beis siv kotten beis. Same psak regarding lulav. There was no lulav. We got one Bein Hashmashot. Natilas lulav beli bracha. Simen samech zayin. Siv kotten aleph. And in that source, the Mishnah Berurah deals both with the mitzvah d'oraisa or a mitzvah d'rabbanan, both of them. Bein Hashmashot, you do not say a bracha. And he deals with an androgynous, safek zocha, safek nekeva, legabe mitzvahs mila, legabe mitzvahs tzitzis, mitzvahs that a woman is exempt from them, and an androgynous is safek isha. He has to perform those mitzvahs without a bracha. And the Mishnah Berurah clearly deals, Bein b'mitzvah d'oraisa, Bein b'mitzvah d'rabbanan. So how to reconcile all these theories? I think the question is, are we dealing with Bein Hashmashot Tchilas Hayoim or Sof Hayoim? It is a nuance, but I think it's emes. How do we define Kula and Chumra? So what is the maskon if we say Sveike d'Rabbanan L'Kula? I think B'Tchilas Hayoim, at the beginning of the day, the question is, could I be Yoitze Bein Hashmashot or not? Do I need to wait for Tzeisek Rechovim? The question isn't, am I Chayev or Potur? That's not really the question. You're going to be Chayev in another 5 minutes. When we need to decide Kula or Chumra, how do we define Kula and Chumra? Chumra says you cannot be Yoitze. You need to wait another 10 minutes. Kula says, no, you could be Yoitze right here and now. You don't need to wait. But if it's Bein Hashmashot b'Sof Hayoim, the question is different. Am I Chayev or Potur? The day is almost over. Chumra would mean you're Chayev. Kula would mean you're Potur. So whether it's Shofar or Lulav or Megillah or any other mitzvah, Bein Hashmashot shel Sof Hayoim, if we assume Sveika d'Rabbanan L'Kula, it means you're not Chayev. And if the halachic ruling is you're not chayiv, you can't say a bracha. We still would recommend, me'ikar din you're not chayiv, but why not? Chacham leiv yikach mitzvahs. You need to pursue mitzvahs. But if Sveika d'Rabbanan L'Kula says you're not chayiv, how could you say a bracha? Bein Hashmashot, in the beginning of the day, Sveika d'Rabbanan says you could be yoitze, and therefore you could say a bracha. So according to this svara, if I'm right, we would say the same regarding Megillah. So if a person reads the Megillah Bein Hashmashot b'Tchilas Hayoim, he could say a bracha. Ma bein Megillah l'Sefirat Weiss. One could argue Megillah is Divrei Kabbalah Chamira me Divrei Seifrim, but fundamentally they should be the same. Now this makes matters more complicated. So what is the din if a person wants to read Megillah ben Aloisa Shachar and Neitzacham in the morning? L'choyre, that is, kamo, Sof Hayoim. Sof Hayoim, he can't say a bracha. What would be the din if a person wants to read the Megillah ben Aloisa Shachar l'Neitzacham, not the Megillah of yesterday night, which he didn't do yet, but the Megillah of Yoim, the morning Megillah, not the light Megillah? He would say a bracha, because that is similar to Sfiras HaOmer. Ki b'tchilas hazman, Kula says you could be yoitze. So how about a person that wants to read the Megillah twice, Bein Aloisa Shachar, let's say Sekechovim, and we find a similar possibility in Mesechet Brochas, legabe koira kriya shema Bein Aloisa Shachar Neitzacham, he could be yoitze Krishma Shalavos and Krishma Shachas. And that would really be strange. So on the Makriya of yesterday night, he can't say a bracha. And then on the Kriya of today, he could say a bracha. Because regarding Megillah Shel Yom, it's like Sfiras HaOmer. Regarding Megillah Shel Lailo, it is like Shofar, Megillah, the mitzvahs in which one cannot say a bracha according to the Mishnah Berurah. Shofar, Lulav, and Megillah that we quoted. And that would be somewhat strange. Interesting. So, up to this moment, I spoke about 5 sources. We started with Sfiras HaOmer. Shofar, Megillah, Lulav, and Samach Zayin, which is a general discussion. We continue on our journey. Reish Samach Aleph. We're dealing with the mitzvah of Erivu Chatzeres. Erev Chatzeres comes to permit Haitzor Meshus HaYochid L'Chotzer HaMeshutefes HaMe'ureves. From the private domain to the somewhat semi-public domain. Reish Samach Aleph, Siyef Aleph, Bialocha says, B'diyevet b'shas adchak, one could be maniach erev ben hashmashos. But would he say a bracha or not? He proves from the Magen Avraham he could say a bracha. And he wonders, Sveike d'Rabbanan l'kula. L'chayre we should say, you could be maniach erev, but don't say a bracha. The reason we do say a bracha, argues the Mishnah Berurah, it's a takuna miyuchedes. Because that is chazal, that you could rely on eruv chatzeres ben hashmashos. Tzorach loimer, it's a takonas chachamim that sveikoi kevadoi and ben hashmashos is kevadai yoim. Why would the Mishnah Berurah maintain mitzad svara one should not make a bracha? Kuf Samach Aleph, Sif Yud Aleph, and Dina Netilas Yadayim. Shechanoch Paskins. If water is suffik kosher, suffik puzzle, suffik nasa malacha loy nasa, suffik tameim, suffik doirim, suffik you have a shiur or you don't have a shiur. You're yoitze netilas yadayim. We're dealing with netilas yadayim lesuda. There are 4 different halachas of netilas yadayim, as you all probably know. Netilas yadayim ruach ru when you get up in the morning. Netilas yadayim yoitze v'beis hakisa. Netilas yadayim letfilah, netilas yadayim lesuda. This halacha in Kuf Samach deals with netilas yadayim leseuda. Sfeikoi toher. And the Mishnah Berurah is medayek from a prima godim, you could say a bracha. And he wonders why, and he says, because if you're yoitze netilah, you could say a bracha. And I wrote the same regarding Eruv Chatzeres and Reish Samach Aleph. No, by Eruv Chatzeres, he didn't write the same. By Eruv Chatzeres, Mishnah Berurah writes, Lachori should not say a bracha. And the only reason he does say a bracha is because it's a special takona. Asu ben hashmashos ki yoim vadai. So how does he learn and compare that to netilas yadayim? Unless we say netilas yadayim is also a special takona. Because this halacha is a Mishnah Mefureshes in Masechet Yadayim, Perik Beis, Mishnah Daled, Sofek ben netilas yadayim is Torah. So one could argue, yes, by both of these halachas it's a takona miyuchedes. But why say so? According to my basic approach, it's mistaver, one should say a bracha. And before I explain why, we're visiting site number 8. And that's not a Mishnah Berurah, but a Machlokes and Achronim. Eruv tavshilin, you need a tavshil. Do we say komish kovush kemavishal? If you pickled something, is it like bishul? In isa v'heter kovush kemevushal, would we say the same regarding erev tavshilin? The Chacham Tzvi Simakuf Chav Beis, one of the greatest achronim going back 350 years, the Chacham Tzvi says, regarding the erev, sveike d'Rabbanan lekula. It's a din d'Rabbanan erev tavshilin, but without a bracha, because sofek brachas lekula, and you don't say a bracha besofek. Shalas Teshuvas Noide b'Shorim, Rabberesh Ashkenazi, one of the great Gedolim in Galicia, Oire Chaim Simavav, brings the Chacham Tzvi and he disagrees, and he says, Min ha-svara, if it's a kosher erev, you say a bracha. Afal pi she'ein li rayis. I don't remember any proof. I have no rayis, but that's the svara. And I wonder, he should bring a raya from Erev Chatzeres Reish Samach Aleph, Netilas Yadayim Kuf Samach. Not from the Mishnah Berurah, because he was 60 years older than the Mishnah Berurah. But the sources of these halachas, by Netilas Yadayim and Erev Chatzeres, the Magen Avraham and the Prima Godim, I think Noida B'Shorim is right. You do say a bracha. Why? These 3 mitzvahs, Erev Chatzeres, Erev Tavshil, and Netilas Yadayim, are they doime to Svias Oime Ben Hashmashos Betchilas Hayom, or to shoyfa lulav megolas bein Hashmashot soifa yom. So regarding Eruv, it's actually soifa yom, because the proper time to do the Erev is Erev Shabbos and not Shabbos, and not Yom Tov. But in reality, has nothing to do neither with Bein Hashmashot Tchilas Yom nor with the Bein Hashmashot soifa yom. All the other sources, 5 in number, that we quoted in the first part of today's Shiur, are mitzvahs, chiyuvim. Chiyuvim shal karkafte de gavra. Chiyuvim that rest upon each and every individual. So the question is, how do we define kula and chumra? Chiyuv and ptur, or could it be yoitza, or it can be yoitza? These 3 mitzvahs, Eriva Chatzeis, Eriva Tavshilin, Netilas Adar, are not really mitzvahs in the pure sense. They are machshirim, matirim. One doesn't have a chiyuv of anochas eruv, neither Eriva Chatzeis, neither Tavshilin. He doesn't have a chiyuv of Netilas Yadayim Lapas unless he wants to eat bread. He wants to eat mamoitzim shus. He wants to cook miyom tov l'Shabbos. So in mitzvahs of this nature, that are all about the outcome and the result, Kula would say you're yoitza. Chumra would say you're not yoitza. So if we paskin sveiket rabbanan lekula, and it's a kusher and a tila, and a kosher erev, and a kosher erev tafshilin, then one should say a brocha, because that is the essence of the mitzvah. It's all about, is it valid or is it not valid? And if we decide Sveika de Rabbona Lakula and it's valid, of course he should say a brocha, because that is the essence of the mitzvah. Source number 9 brings us to Hilchos Pesach. Tov Peivav has only one sif, and this sif deals with Shiur Kazayas. And as the Mishnah Brura explains Sif Kotan Aleph, Machlokas Rishonim, how big is a Kazayas? Taisus maintains Chotzi Beitza, the Rambam is Mekel Shlish Beitza. Says the Mishnah Brura, regarding mitzvahs of Seidi Uraisa, Matzah, one needs to be Machmeh Chotzi Beitza. But Mora Bizman Azeh the Rabbanon, and because Sveika the Rabbanon Lakula Lachori Kid Mekel Shlish Beitza, however, says the Mishnah Brura, but we say a bracha on Mora. So how would he say a bracha? And therefore, even Mora, one should be Machmeh Chotzi Beitza. LeCha'oira, Mashma Medivra Mishnah Brura, that even though regarding the mitzvah of Mora, we would say Sveika Rabbanon Lakula, and a shlish beitza, a third of a beitza should be sufficient, but you can't say a bracha. And if you need to say the bracha, you need to be machmir. And why is that? Is it like Sefirat HaOmer? Or like shofar? Or maybe it's like Eruv and Netilas Yadayim. On one hand, Mora is not like Eruv and Netilas Yadayim. Mora is a chiyuv, like matzah, like shofar, like lulav. Yes, it is a chiyuv. But a question we're dealing with is not chiyuv and ptor. Of course he's mechuyev. It's not Bein Hashmashot. It is the Shiur of Moror. And therefore, I think the question regarding Moror is not, is he chayev or potu? Of course he's chayev. The question is, could he be yoitzu with this Moror or not? So it should be similar to Sefirat HaOmer, Bein Hashmashot, should be similar to the 3 later sources. If it's valid, you make a bracha. If he's yoitze, you make a bracha. Because the essence of the question is he yoitze or not yoitze? Sveika that Rabbanan Lakula says he's yoitze. So why does the Mishnah Berurah say, if you want to make a bracha, you need to eat a chotzi beitza? When we closely analyze the Mishnah Berurah, I think it's clear to the contrary. Even if you eat a shlish beitza moror, you could say a bracha. Because in the last line of this Mishnah Berurah, Sif Kotan Aleph, the Mishnah Berurah says, because we say a bracha on moror, you need to do shtadlas to eat a chotzi beitza. Im loy shu cholish v'kosh aloi, da'az yochal lahokal shlish beitza k'shittas Rambam. So if he has a chodesh v'koshaloi, does he eat more without a bracha? Definitely not. If that would be the halacha, the Mishnah Berurah would say so. He should stress that. So I think it is clear in Mishnah Berurah. What he means to say is this: because we say a bracha lachatchila sham, that he should steer clear from any suffix. We wouldn't like to get into a suffix of a bracha levatula, and therefore, if possible, he should eat a chotzi beitza. Shiur kazai is the bigger one, chotzi beitza. However, imu chodesh v'koshaloi, he could rely on a shlish beitza with a bracha. It still is a shtickle pela b'yainai. Why does the Mishnah Berurah say lechatchila you need to be machmir only because of the bracha, and why not because of the mitzvah? I think in Tov Beites Siv Beis, in the very first source in today's Shiur, Hamedaktik in Einam Sefirat Seisekom, is that necessarily because of the bracha? I would assume it's because of Gufa Mitzvah. Somewhere between the Ran and the Rosh. The Ran says, you can't rely lachatchila on Sofik the Rabbanan Lakula. The Rosh says, of course you could. And that's the opinion of Taisus. So the Rashba is a compromise. Hamedaktikim Einam Sefirat Seisekom. So why in Tov Peivav does the Mishnah Berurah feel the reason that he be machmir lachatchila chotze beitza is because of the bracha? Why not because of the mitzvah? Tzorech loimer that the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah is legabe bracha tzorech lahachmir tfei, and we find that in Mishnah Berurah Siman Samach as well. Sofek bracha levatola chomer tfei mishar isurim derabanan, and that is why the Mishnah Berurah says lechatchila one should eat a chotzi beitza, but if he can't, shlish beitza with a bracha, as I explained before. When the question is yoitza or not yoitza, Sveika the Rabbanan Kodesh says he's yoitza, and therefore he could say a bracha. Last source brings us back to Sfiras HaOmer. Tov Beites Seif Zayin. And it seems to be a clear contradiction between these two seifim, because in Seif Beis we already explained Sfiras HaOmer Bein Hashmashot with a bracha, because Sveika the Rabbanan Lekula. Seif Zayin, the Shulchan Aruch says, if you forget to count Sefira by night, you could count in the morning without a bracha, and then next night you continue with a bracha. What is the explanation as the Mishnah Berurah explains it? You forgot to count by night. It's a machloikis. The famous machloikis between halachas gedolos on one side and all the rishonim on the other. Halachas gedolos says all the 49 days are intertwined. If you miss one day, you're out. You could no longer count. You no longer have a mitzvah. On the other hand, halachas gedolos paskins Sfiras HaOmer ksheira b'yom v'lo rak b'layla. Taisus Amanocha Samach Bov, all the Rishonim at the end of Psuchim disagree with Halachas Gedolos on both counts, and they say Halachas Gedolos is only B'layla, B'yom you can be Yoitza. On the other hand, each day is a mitzvah b'fnei atzma, and they are not dependent one on the other. So Shulchan Aruch paskins, you forgot to count by night, you count by day without a bracha, because according to Tosfos, you cannot be yoitza Sfiras HaOmer in the morning. You need to count by night. It's a suffix brachas lakula. Next night it's a svek sveike. Suffix amalochek halachas gedolos, and he counted by day. Suffix amdileg yom echad. So in this seif it seems to be clear. Even though our psak would be, you count by day. Sfiras HaOmer b'zman zeh rabbanan, svek rabbanan kula. But you can't say a bracha. But in Seif Beis we proved you could say a bracha. According to the fundamental yesod, I tried to explain in the first half of the Shiur, 25 minutes ago. I think we have a teretz on this stira as well. Seif Beis is Bein Hashmashot b'tchilas hayom. The question there is, could I already be Yoitza, or do I need to wait another 5 minutes? Sveika the Rabbanan Lakuli, you could be Yoitza, therefore you say a bracha. But if you forgot by night, and you remember in the morning, the question is, am I chayiv, or I'm not chayiv? Sveke the Ramona says, you're potter, and therefore you can't say the bracha. Regarding mitzvahs d'oraisa, very famous machloikis between Rabbeinu Yoina and the Rosh Chulen Perek Vav Siman Aleph. Shoichet es akoi. And the koi in Greek is a certain animal, sufek chaya, sufek behemah. If it's a chaya, you need to do kissi adam. Behemah, there is no kissi adam. Sveike d'oraisa l'chumra. Machloikis Rosh Rabbeinu Yoina, with a bracha or without a bracha. And the fundamental question is the bracha always considered as part of the mitzvah? And whenever you need to make mekayim mitzvah, you say the bracha. V'abrocha negreres achrei mitzvah, or do we say milta achritahi? Mitzvah lachud v'bracha lachud. Maybe two sides of the same coin, maybe two sides of two different coins, but they're not the same. And therefore, even though we say you need to do kisei adam, sveiket d'oraisa l'chumra, safek brachas l'kul. And another opportunity, I will explain that these two questions, when you're mekayim a mitzvah d'oraisa mitzad sufek could you say a bracha, when you're yoytze mitzvah rabbana mitzad sufek could you say a bracha, are not necessarily linked one with the other. Yesh lachalek lekan or lekan, but that'll be in another opportunity. So we visited 10 different sugyas, and we're machalek chalukim and machadesh chedushim to work things out. And I think it's a very interesting topic. And all of those listening to me, if you have any additional sources to add on, I love to learn as much as I love to teach. So in another 2 days, it's Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is a simcha in the entire Jewish world, especially in Israel and especially in Yerushalayim. And in previous generations, some Gedolim wondered, why is it a Yom Simcha? It is broadly accepted that it is Yom Elula Reb Shimon bar Yochai. It is the day in which Reb Shimon Olo B'Sara Shemayim, in which Reb Shimon passed away. So some Gedolim say, why would that be a day of Simcha? Chasam Sofer Tshuvas Yerodei Reish Lamed Gimel. Droshes Chasam Sofer Chelik Beis. Chasam Sofer writes, I heard that in Tzfas, they have a party and they dance and sing, and I don't understand. If I would be there, I would not participate in that chagig, in that reception, in that simcha. Shoel HaMeishav uses even more harsh language. Anyways, I am convinced in the days of the B'S Yosef and the Ramo, they wouldn't let this happen. With 1,000, 1,000,000 apologies to the Shoel HaMeishav. This minhag was in the days of the B'S Yosef and the Ramo, and they encouraged it. Shalak Avonos, Drushud Beis. Tragic story. One of the great Mekabolim in town, Rabbi Avraham Alevi, had a minhag, he said, Nachem every day of the year. The Chorm was with them. And he said, Nachem Lag BaOmer. And Reb Shimon came to the Riyah Kodesh in a dream, and he had her oimes. He was hurt by Rabbi Avraham Alevi. Why is he saying, Nachem b'yom simchosi, hu avoide she'yir ben achoma? And a child of his passed away, and he was makabel tanchumim. So the Riyah Kodesh clearly said, yes, this is a day to rejoice and to be happy. And Reb Chaim Vital is ma'id that the Riyah was part of the simcha. Why is that? Last week we already spoke a little bit about Lag BaOmer. And I brought various different opinions. The common denominator of them all is Lag BaOmer is a special day because special things happened in this day. Whether it's Yom Elula, whether it's like the Shulchan Aruch says in Tov Tzaddik Gimel, the epidemic was over and there were no longer any deaths, or different reasons. But the Mekabolim have a totally different approach. It's not that it's a special day because of things that happened this day. It's the other way around. Because this is such a special day, that is why special things happen in special days. So I want to share a few amazing sources with you. Rabbi Yankov Emden, in his famous Siddur, Beis Yankov, writes, Bekitzu Nimratz. And we need somebody to decipher this and reveal the side. He writes, like HaOmer is a day, Kol Kulei Midas Adin. And that is why we're happy. Wow. What does it have to do? There's Aloch and Dina Sanhedrin. If we're done Dina Nefoshes, and the entire Bezin of Chov Gimel says Chayev, then we send them home. Something must be wrong. None of the Dayanim could see a limit chis. Something is confusing. Poitra Moisei. So the Yankov Emden is Zoim is because like the Zoim is Kulei Din, and that is why we're happy. Too much dinim, nefach larachamim. Rabbi Avram Sava, Tzror HaOmer, one of the great Mekaborim in his day and age, Parshat Emor, writes, Lag HaOmer midas adin nefach larachamim. And the remez is, B'soi galov ato tishabreim. When the sea is stormy and there are massive waves, every wave breaks. Gal is lag ba'omer, b'soi galov atot tishabreim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mishaber, breaks the midas adin, and din becomes rachamim. Interesting. The Ari HaKadosh, Shara Kavonis, Drushut Beis, gives us some amazing insight. And he writes, as we all know, Havai is midas rachmim, Elokim is midas adin. When din is nefach larachamim, the three inner letters of Shem Elokim, Lamed Heyud, move back one slot and they become Chof Daled Tet. Instead of Elokim, it's Achdatam. And that is how din is nefach lerachamim. The Rei HaKodesh goes on, Eid hagal hazeh, v'Yankov koraloi gal Eid. This is the sod of Lag BaOmer. The three middle letters that are mahapech din lerachamim, Chof, Daled, Tet, are begematria Lamed Gimel. The entire Shem Achdatam is begematria Ayin Daled 74. The difference between Elokim and Achdatam is 12. Eid is gematria Achdatam. Hagal begematria, three middle letters. My edition is Hazeh. Zeh is begematria 12, and that is the difference between Elokim, which is din, and Achdatam, which transfers din to Rachamim. Gal Eid is the combination of Achdatam and Gal. Last week's Parsha, when the Ibn Ezra tries to explain Shnei Seirim, Goyre lechod Lashem v'goyre lechod la'Azozel. And the Ramban explains Azozel is the Samach Mem, the Sitra Achra, the other side, the side of Tumah. And Davka b'Yom Kippur, we give a soil Azozel. The Ibn Ezra writes, it's a big side. Kishetiyeh ben shloshim v'sholosh tiveneu. When you're going to get to 33, you will understand. Sosan v'lo pirish. Gilei chotzei tefach, v'chiso elef tfochim. The Ramban has a very lengthy discussion about this Ibn Ezra, and the Ramban suggests that he means count 33 psukim from the beginning of the Parsha, and it is there that you will find this side. Libi yoimali, ben shloshim v'sholosh is a remes to Lag BaOmer. This soil that we give to Azozel is mahapech midas adin larachamim. And that's our entire Avodah Yom Kippur. When a Kodesh Baruch Hu is shofet kol haaretz, that is a day of din. The Sa'oil Azozel is mahapech din larachamim. And this is the soid. Kishetiyeh ben shlosh v'sholosh teveneu. That is the soid of Lag BaOmer. of the Shem Achdatam, which is Mahapech Din L'Rachamim. Every day, La'achar HaSvira, Chasidim say a perek in Tehillim, La'manatzeach Beneginois. And the reason we say this perek is it has 49 words, excluding La'manatzeach, which is just the introduction to the perek. 49 words of this perek coincide with 49 Yemei Svira. But if you will count from the beginning of the perek, day 33 is Shem Elokim, Midas Adin. Midas Adin is Nehefach L'Rachamim. So why is it the three middle letters? Some later commentators on that say, because the Aleph has nowhere to move. If the Aleph moves back, he's going to fall off the cliff. He's at the precipice. Well, I don't think that's very reasonable with the Kabbalistic view. How about the Mem? The Mem could move back, but he's still a Mem, because the Mem Sofit becomes a Mem Pshuto. Libi Yoimeli, it is the middle, the Pnimius, that makes the difference, because in Pnimius, Midas Adin is Rachamim. And I wrote a lot that I spoke about Rebbe Kiva that taught us, whenever tragedy strikes, called Yovad Rachmana L'Tavavid, we might not see it, we might not feel it, but we believe it. That is what Rebbe Kiva taught us, called Yovad Rachmana L'Tavavid, and in Pnimius every din is Rachamim. And that is why it is the Oisius of Pnimios that move back, and a Mahapach Din L'Rachamim. And why do they move back and not forward? I think that, once again, is based on the Medrash, the beginning of Chumash Bereshis. B'tchila, Ora b'machshov v'ravro et ha'olam b'midas adin. Ra'a HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'eino olam eskayim. Higdem midas harachmim b'midas adin. So rachmim comes before din. So when din is nefesh harachmim, the oisius move back to those that are before them. So this is all divrei remez. Achdatam. Chov Dalatet is also the Rosh Tevis. Ki toivim doidecho. Ki toivim doidecho. And that is the posuk in Shir HaShirim. Yeshukeinim and Eshikois pihu. Ki toivim doidecho. And that is the ultimate ahavo. The ultimate rachamim. And that is brought forth, brought about, inspired by Elokim, which becomes Achdatam, and the remez of the three Oisius of Pnimius is Yishukenim and Eshikas Piuki Toim Dedechamiyain. That's a total different approach to what Lag Boimer is all about. So when we learn this sugya, we very much more appreciate how wonderful, how important it is to daven on this very special day. This is a day which has this gula, transforming Midas Adin to Midas Rachamim. Beroiges Rachamim Tizkoyo. And that is what Lag Boimer is about. So let us all daven and hope. Hundreds of thousands of people make their way to Miran. We need to daven. No Tekola should come out of this. Baruch Hashem and it's a soul. Things are getting better by the day. Numbers are coming down by the day. But we still need a lot of tefillas. And of the schus of the Tana Hu Eloki Reb Shimon Bayechui, Kodesh Baruch Hu should be mekabar tefillas. And now we're here, Hurei Tshuva. The Ma'or Naim was one of the great Hasidic giants, and he writes, if you can't make it to Reb Shimon's Kever, learn Reb Shimon's Torah. And it is as if you're at his Kever and you daven. I don't go to Lag Ba'oim, to Reb Shimon Lag Ba'oim. It's so time-consuming. But every year, I learn a lot of Zohar on Lag Ba'oim, and that is my way to connect to Reb Shimon and to be Ma'or Rachamei Shemayim B'schus Atana Hu Eloki. Many people sing B'schus Atana Hu Elokai. They don't mean bad. But that is divrei kfira, chas v'shonim. There is no Tana Elokai. Hatana Eloki is the right way to pronounce this phrase. B'schus Hatana Hu Eloki, Kodesh Baruch Hu should be mekabel our tefillas, our avoida, our Torah, and our simcha. And Reb Shimon should be emeretz yoshela oire racha v'shamayim. We should be zerchet to refuas and yeshuas and achomois. And time has come. We should be zerchet to be as a Moshiach, binya beis hamikdash b'mheru v'yomeinu amen.